When I bought my E36 nearly 16 years ago, I never imagined the price of these cars reaching what they have today. In fact, I remember when E36 owners unanimously agreed these cars would never be worth anything. They just made too many of them. But it turns out that I and a bunch of idiots just like me went out and bought all of these cars up, turned them all into giant turds, and then left the really expensive ones to command a high price premium today. And if you're somehow lucky enough to have one of these cars, well, keeping it on the road isn't necessarily cheap either. While BMW and aftermarket companies have done a really good job of supplying parts for these cars, what you can't get from them, you have to go to the used market for. And with the rising price of cars comes a rising price of parts. So if you're someone like me who wants to restore one of these cars now that they're getting kind of old, well, let's just say it really hurts the wallet. In fact, this car began as a cheap high school project for me, and now it feels like I'm undertaking a classic European restoration. But the unfortunate reality of it is, that pretty well defines it.
I've found that it's critical to pump the brakes on the projects on occasion and remind myself to have fun. So on Sunday, I told my friends to head over to the shop and to bring their E36s with them. It might be selfish, but I'm looking to maximize my own excitement and inspiration as my car nears completion. My buddy Blake brought over his gorgeous Boston green coupe, which sits over top a beautiful Modena leather interior. My buddy John brought over his silver coupe, which has an S54 lurking under the hood. And our buddy Matt brought over his Techno Violet coupe, sitting atop a beautiful set of BBS Impol wheels. My car was in some fantastic company, and while the boys spent most of the day cleaning and detailing their cars, there was some fun to be had as well. Our friend Blake decided to test fit my girlfriend's 18-inch BBSs on his car, and the results were fantastic. And the great outcome was made all the more fun by the fact that Blake has spent the last number of years trash-talking 18-inch wheels on E36s, so we had to rub it in his face. Test fitting each other's wheels is a common pastime here at the StanceWorks shop, but rarely are the results quite this good. And then, of course, there's my car too. Not wanting to feel too left out of the detailing extravaganza, I decided it was finally time to clean up the engine bay of my car just a bit. After all, it used to be kind of pretty. It was nice to clear away the layer of dust and dirt that had formed from sitting both at my shop and at the body shop, but the cleanup process revealed a handful of things. Anything in the engine bay that's raw aluminum has become oxidized and needs refinishing. Anything that's plated, such as my strut bar, needs to be completely stripped down, and I need to come up with a new solution. And then, of course, there's all sorts of other details, such as my strut mounts, which need to be stripped and refinished because they're showing signs of corrosion, and this only scratches the surface. I need to focus on not letting perfection become the enemy of good enough, or this car will nickel and dime me to death. But I do need to decide exactly how far I want to take this restoration process, because I do want a really nice car when I'm finished. Now let's be real, I know that cleaning the engine bay of this thing isn't going to get it done any more quickly. Instead, we need to focus on reassembly. Now I took this car apart almost 3 years ago to paint it, and that means those parts are scattered everywhere, and I don't have any recollection of how most of it goes back together. We're going to have to be looking at some parts diagrams and what have you. Now, I've bought a lot of parts that we're going to need to restore this thing, things like new rubber gaskets and door sills and things like that, but I'm also realizing I'm missing a lot of it, and if I want to get this thing done, we've got to figure out what those parts are. So let's dive in, see what we've got, and see what we've got to order, and then bite the bullet and pay for it. I worked my way through the shop looking for every box with parts for this car in it, and needless to say, there is a lot to unpack. This is nothing short of intimidating, trying to remember exactly how this car goes back together. I might be confident when it comes to building a custom Ferrari, but this is out of my wheelhouse. But it seems obvious to start with the basics. I think we need to get glass back in this car so that we can actually drive it. Everything that came out of the car is in pretty good shape, and I don't see a reason to go so overboard that we need to put new glass in it as well. What we have here is just in need of a really good and deep cleaning. To install this stuff, we've got to start with the gaskets. And yes, I did go out and buy brand new OEM BMW gaskets for all 4 windows. That might sound like overkill on the surface, but keep in mind my car was built in 1992. That means these old, dirty window seals are 30 years old. They're dry and aging, and I don't want to risk having a leak or a problem just because I got cheap and tried to make this old stuff work. But here's where this episode begins to rear its ugly head. For example, this particular piece is warped and the adhesive's long gone, so it's unusable and the window can't go in until I get a new one, and I didn't realize that beforehand. The front glass can't go in yet either because I realized I failed to replace the front window guides, which are damaged. So, add in about $400 for all of these parts and the associated hardware to install the quarter windows, and you realize just how quickly this build is going to spiral out of control. And all of those costs are on top of what I already spent on gaskets, which has tallied up into the thousands.
I know you guys really don't need a rundown of every part we've got here, so we'll just kind of glance over it. But a lot of this stuff here is the old door molding trim, which we're not going to use anymore. We're going to convert to M moldings. We'll touch upon that here in a few. I've got new brake ducts, some new clips, new door handle surrounds, just to kind of clean things up. Everything in this box is stuff that came out of the car, so we'll have to figure out things like door handles, and I'm realizing I should replace this piece of it while we're at it. I have no idea if that's separate or if I have to replace the entire thing. To be decided. And then there's a lot of just kind of miscellaneous junk. There's like door pocket pieces, some interior trimmings that go like behind door panels and stuff. There's just a lot of stuff I gotta figure out. Lots of bags of hardware, things like that. And then over here we've got, I think, a piece of rear window trimming and the cowl panel, which is new. That'll help clean up some of the exterior. Overall, there's some sorting that's got to happen. Most of this stuff is old, to be honest with you. Over here, we've got Chloe snacking down on a treat, and we've got new wheel well liners that I've got to decide if I'm going to put in, but I have them in case we want them. And then we've got some exterior parts like lighting, so let's figure that out.
The first order of business is figuring out the fog lights. I ordered up some new glass units from BMW to fill the holes in my front bumper, along with ordering the brackets that we're going to need to mount them, because as you guys can probably guess, I have no idea where the originals are. The only problem is only one bracket showed up, so I can't actually install these yet. Thankfully, a few years ago I ordered fog light delete panels, because at the time that's what I thought I wanted. So I came across those in a box and decided for now we can install these instead, because it'll help clean up the front end and help to make this car look at least a little bit more complete when I see it every morning when I walk into the shop, as opposed to looking like a disassembled mess. I also ordered up the mesh grille for the front bumper, and one would assume that installing it would be a pretty easy ordeal, but it turns out that the hardware that came with it wasn't even close to fitting. But this does give us a chance to talk about one of the best resources out there that we've never touched upon, McMaster Carr. Dare I say it, this giant book might be one of the most important literary works of the 21st century. Inside are the sacred scriptures, you know, the part numbers you need in order to order pretty much anything you could ever want to fabricate. Some 4,000 or so pages worth. If you can think of it, and it has some industrial use, there's almost no doubt it's somewhere in this book. Every version, every variant, guaranteed. What we're looking for is on the wonderfully named Push Nuts for Unthreaded Shafts page, and you can see the exact type of push nut that BMW uses for this grille assembly. I found the right ones and ordered them up. Back on the lighting front, I found the taillights for the car hiding in a box in the trunk. It's amazing how much more complete the car looks with taillights installed in it instead of having sheet metal holes at the back end. Now, I already know there's guys in the comments losing their minds over crystal LED taillights. Some of you guys are probably questioning any bit of credibility I've built up over the last year, but you know what? You're just gonna have to deal with it. I bought these taillights years ago because I always wanted a set, and honestly, I like them. I think they pair well with the color of the car and the brightly polished wheels. I want to see the car in a finished state with them on. I never got to enjoy them. They're not a permanent solution. I'm probably gonna put factory ambers on here at some point so it matches the front and kind of fits that relatively OEM plus type of look that I'm going for, but I like them. You're gonna have to deal with it. Those of you that like them, here you go. LED tails on the E36, that's my choice. On the topic of controversial parts, the rear wing has caused some comments too, but I'm excited to tell you a little bit about it. Believe it or not, this wing is a factory BMW part, and it comes from the 1995 E36 M3 Lightweight, pictured here. It's more or less the best version of the car that we got here in the United States. And its wing, while wild, is one of the coolest factory options, period. So I had to buy one for myself. Also buried in the trunk are all of the pieces of bumper trim for this car, which there's no doubt you've noticed are missing. The only problem is, all of this bumper trim is incredibly sun-faded from sitting in the California sun for years on end. There's no way this stuff is going to be up to par with the rest of the car, so I reached out to my friends at FCP Euro, and they've got a box on the way with all new bumper trim for this car. To go along with it, I've also got flat M3 door moldings to go down each door. And with those parts installed, we'll be pretty close to finishing the exterior of the car, minus fixing all of these terrible body gaps. Well, that and installing our M3 side skirts and the window glazing that'll run from the A-pillar and wrap around the C-pillar. But I'm going to leave both of these in their packaging until we're ready to install them because the last thing I want is for damage to happen. On the topic of running gear, we finally have our custom brake pads and the last few brake line fittings we need to wrap up the brake install, which brings us to the interior. This is without a doubt the worst part of the entire car. It's in a terrible state at this point, and it doesn't help that E36 interiors are notorious for flat out falling apart. So let's talk about a game plan. If you've been watching for a long time, you'll remember when I bought these Brid Zeta 2s for the Ferrari project. I had them early on in the build because initially I bought them to use in the E36, and now that plan is coming to fruition. I think their shape's going to look incredible in the car, but they're definitely in a state of disrepair. That's to be expected when buying old Japanese seats. The plan is to reupholster them to match this, a one of 125 original 325 M-Tech interiors. I've got the front seats, the rear seats, and the door cards, but it's all in relatively rough shape and needs to be reupholstered. So why not go all out? I've mentioned it before, but my E36 was originally a sunroof car, but when I took the car to Axis Paintworks, Colin suggested perhaps it was finally time we get rid of it in favor of a slick top. With that comes the need for a new headliner, but thankfully my girlfriend found a slick top E36 headliner for sale, and so we're going to get this reupholstered too, along with all of the pillars and the parcel shelf. Alright, I know I'm getting a little bit carried away on this interior, and it's hard to justify all of the costs because they're definitely not necessary. But that's not to say that E36 interior pieces, if you want to put one together, aren't expensive these days. I mean, a set of reasonably nice door cards from any E36 is going to cost you $500, if not twice that. And all the little trimmings and knickknacks inside, I mean, this stuff really adds up, and it's all costs I wasn't really expecting to encounter when I threw most of my original stuff away and thought, I'll just replace it all down the line. But when it comes to the fabric of the interior, what I have in this box is what's going to make the job work. We can't get original M-Rain fabric anymore, it's just not a reality, but ASC Fabrics makes a perfect replica of the original material and pretty much every other cool BMW fabric ever made. Now, they were kind enough to send this stuff over, and it's gonna make our interior look incredible when we're done. We're gonna load all of our pieces up into the truck and head over to MST Upholstry, and he's gonna tackle this project, reupholstering it all with the ASC M-Rain fabric and Alcantara, and I'm pretty excited to see how it's gonna turn out. Let's go drop this stuff off. And it's a really good sign when you show up to your upholstery shop and there's already an E36 there receiving the exact same treatment you're getting. This particular E36 is receiving a dove gray version of the M-Rain interior, and the boys were hard at work pulling everything apart and making it perfect once again. It was good in reassuring me that Alex at MST is the right man for this job, and I'm really excited to see what he's going to do with my interior once it's all finished up. He comes highly recommended from a number of friends, and it seems like everyone has come out of the woodwork to say he's done something on one of their cars. I spent a little bit of time hanging out, shooting some video, and watching his team work their magic, and it's left me with a serious sense of excitement to return here in a few weeks and pick up a completely new interior for a project of my own. Alright, so we're back from MST. The interior parts have been dropped off. I've got to source some door cards for him, so if you or anybody that you know has a set of black E36 coupe door cards in perfect condition, I don't care about the insert color, I need them. Hit me up, let me know, I need them ASAP. But as far as the rest of this project goes, we're getting really close. I know that this episode wasn't action-packed, it's mostly just cataloging and figuring out, but now that I've gotten that stuff out of the way, I really can get all of those parts we've listed on order and here so we can fully assemble this car. For the exterior, we've really just got those trim pieces left and we got to get the glass back in it. MST's working on the interior, and before long we'll be able to bolt it all in. And for the underpinnings of the car, there's only a few things that we need to put back on so that we can drive this thing. Honestly, I'm pretty excited about it. I'm glad you guys have been watching along. And I guess at this point it's probably kind of understandable why this car has snowballed into such a crazy expensive build. As said at the beginning, this really was kind of my high school project. This was cheap when I got it. I bought this when these cars really weren't worth all that much, and it was the result of having my first ever BMW totaled the first day I ever drove it to school. But here we are, and I've got probably as much money tied up into this silly thing as I spent to buy a Ferrari. And that probably sounds crazy on the surface, but that's kind of a double-edged sword. I bet a lot of you guys would be surprised what you can buy a Ferrari for, but it's also surprising just how crazy old BMW parts pricing and car pricing is getting. But I guess my punctuating point is that all of the costs are worth it, especially on this car. I absolutely love this thing. It's never going anywhere. It's a project I want to continue evolving and working on, and I'm really just excited to get to drive this car again. It's been a long time since I've gotten to sit behind the wheel and really give it a rip. With any luck, that'll happen soon though. Beginning of next week, all of the parts that I've outlined in this episode will be here, presuming there's no shipping snags. So we'll go through, we'll put it all together, and we'll pull it outside for the first time in a long time. Thank you guys as always for watching. I'll catch you guys at the end of the week. See you then.